I'm gonna start recording here. This is November 12th,
Brilliant.
5:30 class 3. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Brilliant.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for doing that, Dan. Guys, I'm going to go just a little bit quicker on this one. But again, the first one, we're going to take the first page, divide a line 9 by 12. You can see them highlighted here. Can anybody tell me what they gave for their points? So their final score. Gave it a 3. 3. I'm seeing a 3. 3. Okay. Can somebody, if anybody did not get 3, can you come off mute and tell me? No, I know that's a little bit calling people out, but don't feel ashamed here. This is the time to learn. We're all in this together. So if you got something other than 3, go ahead and come off mute now and we can just discuss some of the numbers there. All right. Everybody understood that first one. So we divided line 9 by 12 and we got 3 after we figured it out because it's below our threshold. So we're going to go now, skip down to pages 7 and 8. All right. I'm going to zoom in here. Now, can somebody tell me, this is the number of salaries that are over 170,000. Can somebody tell me the score that they gave it? 1, 2, or 3 points? 3. Excellent. Again, why is that? Because when you look here at the salaries, does anybody see even one salary over 170,000 US dollars? No, so that's going to be 0. Of course, when you divide any number by 0, you get 0. Excellent. We're going to go now to page 9. And then this one's thankfully, a little easier for me to navigate than the other one. But we're going to take line 1E divided by line 1H. Can somebody come off mute and tell me what you got for the final score? 1, 2, or 3 points? 3. I'm seeing 3s. Excellent, guys. Excellent. Okay, so now we're going to go to page 10. Actually, I guess before I do, does anybody have any questions thus far? Just want to open it up to make sure it's clear that we divided these 2 lines. Great. Okay, so page 10. Excellent, guys. I am loving how studious you guys are at finding this, because as you can see, I'm having trouble even just navigating Adobe. And believe it or not, I will say it's harder than it looks. All right, line 1E. Actually, sorry, I want to make sure I'm on the right one. I don't skip down. So now we're on page 10. We're going to take line 1B and divide it by line 25B. So right at the top here, 1, if I can go up to the top without skipping. What do you see here? 0. So what do we know the answer is going to be? What did you get? Is somebody come off mute for their final score? Yep, I see 3. 3s. Everybody got 3? Great. Okay. So now let's stay on page 10. We're going to go down to the bottom now, 25C. All right, so A, B, C, you see 106,245, right? We're going to divide that by 818,824. Can somebody come off mute and tell me what score you gave them? Or else just show a number there on your screen. What number did you give? I see 2. What other numbers? I see another 2. I see a 3. I see 2. Okay. So will somebody go ahead? I'm just going to go ahead and do this math together. 1 second while my computer pulls up a calculator. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take box 25C and divide it by 25A. Okay, guys? So I'm just going to go 106,245, and I'm going to divide by 818,824. All right, so that's 0.129. So on my 990 analysis sheet, I see that anything that is 0.12 over I want to make sure I didn't skip a line here, but because it's you guys see here, let me just show you guys. This is the 990 analysis form. So if it was over 0.15, we would only give it 1 point. Sorry, I filled in this in from the previous one. This is not the same one. But because it's over 0.1, remember our score being 0.12, what would you guys give it here? It's going to be a 2, right? Because it's not over this 0.15, but it's over 0.10. So we're going to give it 2. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? Anybody want to come off mute? Okay, we're pretty clear. Excellent. Alrighty, then we're going to go to the final one, line 25D, fourth column. So basically, we're taking this number here, 18,526, dividing it by the first column A. What did you guys get for the final score? I've seen a 3. Anybody else get a 3? 3. Excellent. Did anybody not get a 3 that they want to discuss real quick? Totally fine. This is the time to learn. This is the time to ask questions. Okay, I'm seeing 3s all around. Anybody, somebody give me a thumbs down if they didn't get something right, or they want to ask a question, or you can just raise your hand. This is the time to ask questions over a whole thing. So you guys, generally speaking, have a pretty good understanding by now of what we're doing here in these 990 analysis. So if we gave you another 990, or you're better yet, you're doing the research for your own organization, does everyone feel confident that they can go on to GuideStar? They know how to navigate GuideStar, find that 990 analysis if it has been uploaded to GuideStar, or sorry, not 990 analysis, but 990 form, and then they can analyze it using this tool. Everybody feels genuinely confident. Does anybody want to ask any questions? Because there's absolutely no shame. This is the time. Believe me, as a student, I'm asking questions all the time. I'm very slow to get it, but you keep going. Like that train that says, I think I can. Eventually you make it to the place where you're teaching everybody. Not everybody, but at least I'm teaching somebody. But believe me, when I say I was a very slow student, and so and I have absolutely no condemnation or shame for anybody who has questions. I actually love interaction. So I just want to give it a space if there is any questions. Alrighty. Well, then let's get right into our presentation for tonight. Give me one moment while I pull this up. Okay, you guys, I want to make sure, first of all, that I did share the right screen. Does everybody see this presentation PowerPoint? Excellent. That's good news. Okay. So tonight, you guys now have a firm grasp of the basics of how to judge and evaluate, at least according to the criteria that we've made. Again, I want to stress that this is not the only criteria by which to judge an organization. I wouldn't even say that this is necessarily a good criteria to judge individual. It doesn't really pertain to individual finances, but this is for a specific place and purpose, namely 501c3 nonprofits. I think it's an incredibly powerful tool to help us get a vision into the type of stewardship we're seeing in these organizations. So what we want to discuss now tonight, now that we have the tools in place to evaluate, we want to take that next step to encourage us towards generosity. So once we evaluated that this is a good organization, I want to overcome some of the obstacles that are in my life that are keeping me from being a part of this organization and making a high impact, making a genuine impact on a community or around the world. So first of all, we're going to discuss why are some of the objections that we might have. What are some of the objections? Can we have some brave souls just kind of give out? I know that you guys don't struggle with generosity at all, but maybe some of your friends or your siblings, maybe. What would be some of their objections to generosity?
Scarcity.
Mm.
Scarcity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's certainly when you feel like you don't have enough for yourself, Tammy, it feels hard to give out of what you would use otherwise use for yourself to someone else, right?
Runaway inflation.
Mm, yeah,
That's a good one, yeah.
we find ourselves in incredibly challenging times, don't we?
Yeah.
Lack of info, or you're not even sure where the money's going, or when it's going, or how it's going.
Yeah, lack of transparency on the part of the organization. Yes.
Some people want to use the money for themselves and are not very passionate about using the money to help others because it's not like in their values.
Fair enough. Yes. And I think, there are so many reasons. I think that, and certainly that, I would say every situation is unique, but there are some, I think we've highlighted them, many of them here tonight. There are some general reasons, at least the ones that we see often as we teach and we instruct on high impact generosity at GU, that we want to address here tonight and help us, at least equip us with some food for thought that we can start to nibble on and understand, and that we ourselves can then use for our own growth and generosity, and we can use to instruct others. I think you guys nailed it on the head, at least some of the high ones is the first one is affordability. This idea, like, I can't even put food on the table for myself, and yet I'm going to sacrifice for the sake of somebody else. And how do I evaluate? Maybe that's, it seems noble to do. Yeah. And yet when I'm confronted with it, how do I decide between who's the greater need? Like, why isn't that person sacrificing for me? You might ask, right? How can I even think about generosity if I am, say, in debt or behind on my bills? And we'll address some of these problems more in greater detail later on, but these are certainly, some very real objections. A lot of times I think we're confronted, especially in a world where we feel like we don't know, there's so many people, that we come in contact with nowadays. If you're living in a city like I am, man, how do I possibly know the character and details about the people that I meet? And especially the organizations, which are made of hundreds of people, if not thousands. And so this idea, like, I might even look at individuals and be like, you know what, that guy right there, he's begging for food, but man, look at what he's wearing, or look at this stuff. How can I know if he's really in need? Again, it comes back to, I think a lot of times, maybe not, we might have compassion on some level for people, but I think it comes back to this idea too of affordability. Like, does he really need it more than me? I think a lot of us feel pressured ourselves, like we want help from other people, let alone us being able to give to others and help out. I think sometimes there's the temptation, or there's the obstacle rather, to say, I don't want to waste my investment, just as I wouldn't want to waste my investment, say, in my 401k or some type of stock market investment. I don't want to invest in people that are just going to spend it on poor things. I want to invest in people that it's going to make a difference in their lives. And sometimes it's hard for me to know, again, but not knowing the character of somebody I'm giving to, or an organization I'm giving to. Are they going to use this for good purposes, or are they just going to waste the money? It's hard to know, certainly. So there's many other, several others that we want to focus on as well. But I would say two of them are fear that we highlighted. I think, we mentioned runaway inflation, which is both, touches on both of these topics. We're afraid of the government making decisions that are going to affect us. And a lot of times I think it's easy to think that the government is going to handle things, or someone else, maybe a charitable organization, is going to handle things on my behalf. So if I'm already paying my taxes, and I think, man, those taxes go into Social Security and other people are paying into that, well, isn't that the responsibility of somebody else, or the responsibility of the government? Why is it that I have to then take responsibility on, again, sacrifice out of what I would use for my own family for the sake of somebody else? So there's a certainly legitimate fear. These are legitimate objections, and we don't want to gloss over these, but we do want to take some time to address them. And one specific ones that I also want to address is this idea of small amounts don't matter. I think this is a common thing that we run into, feeling like as individuals, our money won't go anywhere. You know, it's tough. It's tough to live in a world where there's so much need, isn't it? Has anyone ever felt in, you know, when you have been confronted with somebody else's need, Hunter, have you ever felt this idea of like, wow, this person needs so much, but who am I, and how can I give to them in a way that would actually make a difference? Have you ever felt that before in any kind of situation?
Yeah, definitely. I think or maybe somebody asked for something and I think, oh, well, such and such would be able to meet that goal so much faster than I could. So yeah, I've been there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think these are common thoughts. These are, again, these are not illegitimate objections. These are very real. These are very things that we ourselves, I myself, am dealing with. And so, and there's also, you know, all kinds of interesting things. It comes back to, again, this not being able to know people, but there are crooks out there running organizations, running, you know, panhandle schemes, running these kind of things that quite frankly, I think at the end of the day, we can come up with many objections that the list goes on and on and on. And we certainly can't tackle all of them tonight, but I do want to talk first of all about this idea of affordability. So I can't even put food on the table for myself. You know, that's a very real objection. Not all of us are in a place where we can give financially, especially if we're in debt or behind currently on our own bills. How can we justify taking taking some of the sacrificing for ourselves and giving it to somebody else? But there are other things that we can do. For example, you know, we can give of our time. You know, it is common practice, I think, in many organizations need volunteers. And I think probably is anybody actually here? Does anybody have any anything you'd like to share in this area? Are you guys volunteering at all in any organizations that you'd like to share about? Hiwami, I see you nodding your head. Can you do you mind coming off mute and sharing a little bit about how you volunteer?
Sure. I volunteer in a couple different organizations. I volunteer at different churches in the worship team. I volunteer at Gigi's Playhouse. I help them fundraise. They use their money to give free programs for children with autism. And one of the other ways I volunteer is by doing student-led musical concerts at my local elderly living facility.
Very neat. Thank you for sharing. You know, I think I think with us who are considering how we might give, there are a number of different analyses we can make of our own lives. You know, when we're considering giving and what sacrificing, a lot of times I think it's easy to think, well, this is going to be food for me. You know, I'm going to spend money on myself. But I think if we're honest, there are areas in our own lives, there's margin, so to speak, that we can trim down. And I think it's appropriate for each of us to ask. There is an ancient proverb that said, it's more blessed to give than to receive. And I think if we honestly analyze this and we understand that there is a joy and there is a good feeling and there is a true blessing that comes out of helping others. And oftentimes we might find ourselves maybe not able to sacrifice food on the table, but say, for example, if we maybe might sacrifice in other areas, like say, if I'm going to Starbucks on a regular basis or I'm getting coffee out, how might I sacrifice in a way that makes sense? Maybe I can't sacrifice the food that, you know, that I eat 3 meals a day I need to continue to succeed, but could I potentially make coffee myself? And over time, you'd be surprised how these things add up in our lives. And I think if we're honest, each of us can and there's a benefit to analyzing the margin in our lives and asking ourselves, would I get more out of this giving to somebody else? Would I benefit more by seeing somebody else fed and clothed and protected, or whatever it is the organization that I'd be part of is doing, rather than getting Starbucks or rather than getting coffee from a certain, place that it might be inflated in price, right? As opposed to like making it myself or doing something different. The point is here not to bag on Starbucks or bag on getting coffee, because these are not bad things in themselves. But I think we can get, the point is here is that we can, when we think about these things, get creative in our giving. There's all sorts of ways that we can potentially find opportunities to give. So, in addressing inflation that was mentioned earlier, potentially we can, what would it look like to take something that is a negative, that is actually something that affecting our finances, and turn it creatively into something that we use to our advantage? So instead of having so many things in our life, maybe we buy quality over quantity. And this is going to positively affect us in several ways. Namely, buying a piece of quality equipment will last ideally longer than buying 2 or 3 of that same thing over the course of time. And if inflation is causing prices to rapidly increase over time, then we'll find the value of that first item that we bought, that we might not have to buy another one for, say, 10 years, whereas the other ones we might have to buy 2 or 3 over the course of that 10-year period. We'd end up spending much more money because each of them be successively more expensive. Does this make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? So again, the point is here, not that these are fix-all solutions, but I think we can, if we analyze this stuff, we can get quite creative in how we find opportunities to free ourselves up to give. And again, this is meant to be a free choice. It's meant to be a choice made of our own free will, where we're participating in it. This is not forced out of compulsion or, because I feel like this is something I need to do. We want to give ourselves the opportunity to feel the joy and to feel the life and to feel the good benefits and the blessings, quite frankly, of being able to give towards someone else and seeing the provision make a difference in their lives. I think that's why each of you are here this evening and you're part of this class, is because you genuinely want to make the world a better place through giving. And these are ways that each of us can improve if we're honest. This is not a condemnation thing, beat you over the head, you're not doing enough. No, but this is an opportunity, just like an athlete, on a fellow teammate on a team might encourage his teammate to say, you know what, you're playing really well, you're doing great things, but you know what, if we both work at this, if we both analyze our lives, if we both work hard and train ourselves, we could get even better. We could play at a higher level, we could do more, we could be faster and better. And I think that's a similar principle in so many places in life, that if we really take the time to analyze our own lives, be honest with ourselves, and in some areas of our lives are going to be better than others, but we could trim the fat, so to speak, as they say, or we can tighten the belt, so to speak, and we'll actually, instead of seeing less in our life, I think ironically these things can lead to more, because again, I do believe that there is a blessing that comes from giving to others. There's a joy and there's a peace that comes in my heart as I provide for somebody else. Whereas, the joy I get from purchasing expensive coffee, say, for example, again, I know it seems like I'm bagging on coffee, and I'm not really doing that as much as I just chose it as a common example that we probably all do on a regular basis. The joy that comes from that additional whatever $5, we'll say here in LA, honestly, because quite frankly, you're paying $5 to $7 for a Starbucks drink. I think probably anywhere in the country by now, but certainly here in California. The extra joy that comes from that, I would argue, isn't nearly as satisfying or joy giving as providing for someone else. But I do want to, for the sake of time, just continue to move on. I think some of these guys, again, each of these ones are going to hit differently for each of us. And this is what the point is, that we can take these things and apply them to our own lives, because not each of these points is going to apply equally to each of you guys. So take a closer look at your finances, prioritize, make a specific plan to increase your situation and changes. Again, this is not meant to be an all or nothing thing. This is not meant to be, okay, I can't give, so, or I can't give what I want to, so therefore I'm going to walk away from the whole entire picture. Make a plan. Just as the athlete comes to the marathon, say, for example, I'm preparing to run a marathon. I can't currently run a marathon, but I believe that if I trained myself, if I got a proper organized plan and I diligently applied myself to it, I could get to the place where I am fit enough to run that marathon. I believe that that's possible. And likewise, I believe each of you guys have the ability to grow in your ability to give. And especially if that's a desire in your heart, you already, I think, more than halfway there. Now, we'll talk more about some of the specific plans at a later class, but the goal is here to even start with thinking about, how do I make a specific plan to increase my ability to give? And again, don't despise small beginnings. This is a phrase that I absolutely love, because, Dan loves to use this phrase, a high five. I think a high five, which is just basically like starting with what we might consider small things. I do want to stress so much that this is how every great adventure begins. It begins with one step. This is how every great athlete starts off. They start off with something that there is attainable currently. Start with something and find yourself doing that then on a regular basis, where it becomes so normal you can't imagine your life not doing it. And then that's the new floor. That's the new plateau, where you're now standing on that plateau higher than you were before, and you're able to reach for something more. I think these are all very excellent strategies to help us increase our ability. I want to, there's a specific scripture in the Old Testament from Malachi that God says, basically, he says, talking to the Israelites, these are the audience of the text, and he says, test me in this. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. The tithe, we won't get into this tonight, but basically that was the you could call it the tax that the Israelites had to pay, basically as part of their commitment to God. They said, yes, we'll follow God, and as part of that, we'll give a tithe, and that tithe will go to providing for it provided for a variety of things, but namely those who were doing basically good work for the community, who weren't harvesting their own food, right? So this gives it a little context there. And then it says, bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. And I can tell you guys, I've seen this personally in my own life, experientially. I can tell you that it's not just about giving to get, but there is certainly, an incredible, the return for giving is certainly so much more than just getting back. But I can tell you that there is a principle, I believe, that is deeply embedded within the universe, that those who steward their finances well, and as part of stewardship, I'm including generosity, because I think generosity is not only a good part of stewardship, it's a must part. I think that those who are good stewards must be generous. I think that's part of what it means to be a good steward. And I can tell you from experience that and from scripture, and from I can see countless times in history when I'm looking back and studying things, that those who are generous towards others experience generosity towards themselves, and those who are faithful with little are then given more, because as you handle the responsibility that has been put on you, others look at you and you become a leader, and they offer you then more opportunities to become responsible with even more. And this includes finances. Those who are responsible with little finances ultimately have the same kind of qualities that it'll take to be responsible with a lot of finances. And it's remarkable to me how this plays out over and over and over again. I work in wealth management, as I mentioned earlier, and I can see that those who are excellent stewards of their finances, who are generous towards others, continue to grow. Far from running out, they actually become such excellent, efficient. They're like the excellent athletes. An athlete expends energy to play a game, but it's remarkable how the athlete then has more energy. As you expend your energy in a workout, as you expend your effort into something, you grow in that. You actually grow that muscle, and so you have more the next time after you regenerate. Everybody needs rest, absolutely. We can't go too extreme all the time, fair enough, and that's part of life. But and I guess it's the same with giving. You can't just absolutely give away willy-nilly, but those who give intentionally over and over again, it's remarkable to me how much they have in their storehouse. And I think that this this scripture from Malachi that's in the Bible really highlights this. And I think it highlights a principle that God has placed, that I believe God has placed deep within the universe. But even if you're not a follower specifically of God, I think we can, many cultures around the world have talked in a similar manner of this idea of like karma, this idea of you give what you, or you get what you give, and those that give, say, anger and malice and punishment towards others so often receive, they reap that same punishment and malice that they've sowed towards others. So I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I can't stress this enough. I think that these are incredibly important if we're going to really change in our hearts, and we're not going to just go through this class as an exercise, but we're really going to take this stuff and apply it. We're going to have to overcome the objections, the things that are currently in our way from being generous. All right. So I want to leave you guys then in this next part with just with a proverb to consider, that a generous Proverbs says that a generous person will prosper, and anyone who gives water will receive a flood in return, one translation says, which I think again is so fascinating because I've seen it play out over and over and over again with very wealthy people who continue to give away money and continue to see more come as they steward it properly. So let's talk about our second objection, the fakers. I think this can, especially in a place like California, I think, I don't know where it is, what it's like where you guys are, but I would say relational capital, as I would put it. That's kind of a fancy word for saying how people relate to each other and how much they like each other. The capital meaning kind of like funds or money, and relational meaning relationship. So how much like investment do I have with my fellow neighbor? I would say, unfortunately, we are, at least statistically, sociologically speaking, relational capital is lower in California than it's been in the past 50 years, we'll say. And I don't want to get too much into that. That's not the goal of politics, and sociology is not the goal of my talk today. But I want to say that I live in a place where this argument is, I think, exceptionally relevant, because there's a lot of people who just feel like other people are either faking in their life, or they're living off of a system. And I want to encourage you guys, if this is an argument, I want to encourage you, first of all, that you know what, you don't have to give to those people. If you are uncomfortable, don't do it. It's not, the point is here, yes, I think it's good on some level to experience a little discomfort in life, just like, again, I use the analogy of an athlete making themselves intentionally uncomfortable in a workout. But again, they're not hurting themselves. They're not going to the point where they're stressing their body to the extreme. And if you're uncomfortable and you're not able to, and you think this isn't a good idea, you might be wise in listening to yourself, listening to your body and saying, well, why is it? Maybe this person isn't, this particular person or this particular organization maybe isn't worthy of my money. You don't have to do it. Guilt is not a great motivation for generosity, and I don't want that to be this here tonight. Again, I don't want it to be something that we're heaping upon you, where you're entering into because you feel like obligated. But find someone else that you can be generous towards. Find someone you trust. Surely there is one needy, trustworthy person on the planet that you could be generous towards. Start there. Don't think that they're too small or that you have too little. Start with a simple high five. Volunteer. Help them move out of their house. Help them, serve them in some intentional way. There's things that each of us can do. And I want to tell you guys, if you develop the kind of principles and character principles in your life that cause you to be excellent stewards of even your time, effort, energy, the small things that you consider so small and insignificant now, you'll be given more, and you'll be able to then have a quicker eye and spot people who are needy, and you'll be more intentionally engaged. And you'll be surprised when you're intentionally engaged how quickly you find needy people, and needy people who are worthy to give to, because you're looking for them. And when you're looking for them, it's remarkable. You just start to notice them. They were always there, most likely. But once we start to look for them, you guys ever have that effect? I think it's a psychological effect, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's that effect where you're like, you notice something for the first time, and then all of a sudden everybody has it. You notice that whatever green Ford expedition, and all of a sudden everybody's got a green Ford expedition. I know that's kind of a silly example, but has anybody ever experienced that? Bonnie, have you ever experienced something where you notice something for the first time and you're like, oh my gosh, wait, how have I never seen this before? Because it's absolutely everywhere.
Yeah, it's true. And sometimes it happens with vocabulary words, a word you'd never heard before, and then you hear it the next day or on the news or something like that. So it works in many ways. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, it's so true. And I want to encourage you guys that giving is something similar. If you feel like everybody is, or I would say, I'm using these extreme universals intentionally, because these sometimes what we feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much fake. There's so much fake around me. There's so much like there's these people who are not really needy. They just pretend to be needy. But I want to encourage you guys, if you look for that, you'll oftentimes you'll find what you're looking for. But if you start to intentionally look for needy people or organizations that are meeting needs, I think organizations are great ways to start with, because if you find a good organization that's led by people, they're not themselves needy. They're helping someone in need, and you can partner with them to meet the needs, and they're doing the vetting process because they're really good at finding this. And I want to encourage you guys, though, that there are plenty of needy, genuine people in the world, and you can be generous with someone that you trust. Start with your friends. Doesn't mean you're not generous just because you're helping your friends. And if that's where you start, absolutely. I love being generous towards my friends, and it's helped me train me be generous towards other people as well. So I want to continue on in addressing other objections as well. So we talked before about wasted money. I know this goes alongside with this idea of fakers. A lot of times we feel like people aren't a good investment. So maybe some people can't handle money. That's real talk. Not all of us are qualified to handle money, and sometimes people need some other type of help. So let's look at that potential situation. If you have a passion for the homeless, say, many times there are so many reasons. Even we have a very high homeless population here in California, and I'm continually just confronted with this realization that it's such an intractable problem. If it was just a money problem, California has more money than I'm thinking any other state. If I remember right, their economy is huge. I mean, it's larger than most countries in the world. We have plenty of money in California, and we haven't been able to solve this homeless problem. And again, I know this is getting maybe borderline controversial, but I would like to stipulate that it's primarily because it's not a money problem, and that's why giving more money hasn't really solved it up until now. And that might, that's going to be something that everybody agrees with. But regardless, if I'm the one in this situation and I'm saying, I don't know if this person needs money, I do know they need help, I think it would be a mistake for me to turn away and just say, you know what, I'm not going to give money, so therefore I'm not going to do anything about it. Well, maybe there's something else I can do. Again, let's come back to this idea of being creative. Maybe I don't have money to give, but maybe I could help. There are so many ways to love somebody, and I think love unlocks all kinds of potential in people's lives. It brings out the best in people. If you see somebody who's lacking in some area and you're like, man, I wish they were different. If they would just make different choices, their life would be better. Absolutely. That's, a part of life is making good choices. But there's, and regardless of why people are suffering, we can be part of solving that problem. Maybe they were suffering because of their own choices. Maybe they were suffering because of the choices of others, probably a mixture of both. Let's be real. That's kind of the experience of every human being, but we can be part of unlocking something in their life through serving them. And again, you don't have to do this out of compulsion, but this is just something, if you have objections and you're like, I don't think money is the right answer here, let's be creative. Maybe we can give in other ways. Give time, talent, give something other than just simply money. That's completely legitimate. And that is a way to build generosity in ourselves and to be generous towards others. So let's address fear. I know that there is a need to build up rainy day funds for ourselves and build up things that, unforeseeable things in the future that will happen. Yes, I want to encourage you guys to be prudent. I want to encourage to save. Absolutely. But as I mentioned earlier, I've been in wealth management a few years now, and I have seen over and over and over again this principle of those who are wise and are prudent and are excellent stewards can be generous. In fact, are generous. Like I said, I believe that generosity is a part of wise stewardship, and I've seen it not hurt their bottom line. In other words, not hurt their overall wealth, but actually help it be. When they are thoughtful and engaged with their finances, it's remarkable to me how well those finances then serve them instead of them serving their finances. And I think that's something that's very easy to fall into. It's very easy, even when you have a lot of money, to get in the mode of serving money. And ironically, you trade time for money, and you're just thinking about how to get more money, and it becomes something that dominates you, and actually can, in many cases, I've seen ruin relationships and families. But those who then do the opposite, and I think generosity is a part of alleviating that mindset of serving money. Those who are generous towards others actually have money end up serving them. And far from eliminating their rainy day fund, it actually helps open them up to better steward their finances. And it's surprising to me how much that they flourish even in their wealth. Balance is key. So again, just like an athlete needs time to rest, and can't push themselves beyond what they're capable of today. But if you push yourself to a certain limit and then you rest, you come back to, next week, and you find your limit is slightly greater. You do that 100 times over, and you'll find yourself as an athlete getting to places you may have never thought possible. I want to encourage you guys, it's the same with generosity. Take that step. Balance is key, but keep at it. If you lost your job, wouldn't it be great if you could depend on somebody else's generosity? Just for a second, imagine the world in a place where everybody was generous, where there's this place in Acts that it says that the early church, this was the early the early followers of Jesus, they gathered together in a community, and it said they had no need. They basically came together and they were able to meet each other's needs. And I think truly great communities around the world throughout history have latched on to this principle of generosity and providing for someone else. Because let's be real, we all want this universally. I can't think, is anybody going to say here on the call tonight that they wouldn't want to be able to depend on somebody else's generosity? I mean, maybe it makes us uncomfortable, fair enough, because we're not used to receiving. But like deep down inside, I think we can acknowledge that this is a beautiful thing to be able to depend on other people. So I want to then go deeper into this idea of fear, specifically with the government. So I think with the government, a lot of times because the government is active in redistributing wealth through social welfare programs, say through like EBT, which is providing for food, or through Section 8, which is providing for rent, for housing, and there's a myriad of other programs the government is involved with. I think sometimes it's easy for us to think about the government it's the government's responsibility to take care of the poor. And I think the government, has taken on, for whether you agree with them doing that or not is not really the point. They've taken that responsibility on for themselves, or they've taken that responsibility on. And I see that, though, that's a reality, though. I find it interesting that at least in my understanding of generosity, as I would define it, the government or a politician or any political leader can never actually be generous with somebody else's money, because I believe to be generous requires you to give of your own free will, of your own finances. So say, for example, Bonnie, if I said, Bonnie, you know what, Alyssa really needs funds, I want you to give to her. And I told you, Bonnie, to be generous toward her. And then I said, Alyssa, I'm providing for you by, giving you Bonnie's money. No matter how, even if Alyssa looked to me as the one who was the middleman and the one who gave her the funds, I think we can all understand there's something missing there. There's something that's different than Bonnie actually seeing of her own free will and acknowledging, okay, there's a need that Alyssa has, and I want to give. I'm giving him my own free will. And that, what I believe is missing, is what we discussed in the definition of generosity earlier, a couple class times ago. We discussed that generosity needs to be given of your own free will, right? To be forced in generosity really isn't generosity at all. Does that make sense, Hunter? Do you understand the difference there? So while the government does certainly provide for people at times, and I think we can argue whether or not that we agree with that or not, that's fine. But that doesn't take away from the fact that generosity does bless us. Those who are generous towards others, again, find themselves at the end of a blessing. And I believe that this proves true time and time again. So how good a job is the government doing? Are the problems solved? We can argue about this, and I think all of us probably look at the world today and say, well, actually, even with the government helping, those problems very clearly aren't solved, including the government is going to acknowledge that. And we can see, blame different organizations and feel differently about those things. But what I want to draw attention to tonight is specifically that even if the government were to provide for everybody's material needs, I think we understand that there are so many more things in the world needed than just material possessions. I think, in fact, if we really look deeply within ourselves and our souls, what we're longing for most, yes, it's so important to have a roof over my head and food on the table. And I think probably that's the first need that I look to, that if that's not there, then I'm going to look to that first. But when we look at our inside ourselves, I think we see that we are actually meant for so much more than just food and survival and living in homes. I think what we were meant to do is participate in relationship with other people. And this is something that, quite frankly, I don't think an organization like the government itself can give. I think people working in an organization on behalf can help. And this is where I think generosity is so important. So, talk about entitlement as well. I think that there's certainly a problem with entitlement. I think that's at times that people might be abused, that people can get lazy, that people can manipulate a system. Absolutely, I think that can happen. But I don't think I don't think it's beneficial to ourselves to cause us to miss out on being generous towards someone and using these excuses to get in the way. So I want to then go into, actually, before we transition, I do want to just leave you guys with a quote on that subject, that the government welfare, that all government-sponsored welfare programs are destined to fail. Instead of reducing poverty, they actually tend to increase poverty. And regardless of whether you agree with this or not, there is sociological historical evidence that shows, even as the government, even as the United States government, when I say the government, I'm going to refer specifically to the United States, have dramatically increased spending on social welfare programs, poverty is actually increased in the United States over the same course of time. And I think that there are many reasons for that. And certainly we can't discuss them all tonight, but I think we can agree, or at least I hope we can agree, that this, even having the government involved in social welfare, does not negate the need for people like yourselves, people like me, getting involved with people's lives in a generous way. So I want to go on then and not spend too much more time on the government, but I do want to encourage you guys, as we look towards giving to others, there is really no amount that is too small. That I don't think that this is a place that should keep us from giving. It's easy, as we discussed earlier. I think, Hunter, you agreed with me that sometimes it's easy to fall into this mindset, or it may potentially fall into this mindset that, someone like Bill Gates can give $1 billion, and how can I expect to do anything in Puddle? But what's remarkable is, if you do the math, it's not really the individuals that make the most significant difference in the world, because they're, quite frankly, just the way math works, that the generosity of many people is going to be far more powerful than the generosity. Because honestly, what is Bill Gates compared to, say, 200 million Americans? So if 200 million Americans gave even just $50 once, what do you think? Can anybody do the math real quick? You get $1 billion. So think about, how many times can Bill Gates give away $1 billion? Well, now he's quite wealthy, and so you could say maybe he could do it, a few times over and over and over again. But thinking about the power of 200 million Americans, now there's I think something in the neighborhood of 350 million Americans here in the United States today. So what if everyone gave just $50 a year? We'd see, for the next 50 years, billions of dollars raised. And so I think this is something that's really important to keep in mind. Again, not only personally, but because I think you shouldn't despise small beginnings for yourself. You can start with $50, you can start with $5, and you can grow from there, because who knows how high you could get. Maybe you could get to Bill Gates one day. Maybe if you were generous and you were wise with your funds, you could get to the place where you're giving away $1 billion as well. You really don't know. And honestly, if Bill Gates wasn't always wealthy like he was. And the point is, it's not just, yes, there's a lot of factors involved, but we don't really know the future, just as we don't know if Bill Gates might lose all of his money next week and it might go to somebody else. We can't rule out the fact that that we can rule in the fact that if we are wise with our funds and we're generous towards others, we see a trend throughout history and throughout society today that those who are good with their funds, those who are wise with their funds and generous towards others, increase their wealth over time and are able to do even more with their wealth. So I want to, just in the interest of time, I guess we're approaching 7 o'clock already. I do want to open it up to see if anybody has any questions about what we've talked about so far, just to make sure that I'm not speeding through this too quickly. Okay. Excellent. All right. So I want to talk then about the objection, another objection about this idea of, it goes along with, I think, fear and what we talked about in panhandlers earlier. But I think that there's probably objections in ourselves at times when you think, I can't trust anybody. They're so, it's easy to think that, man, they're just, because I've seen so many crooks out there that everybody's a crook. I project onto the rest of society what I've seen over and over again in my experience. And sometimes, you're right. There are crooks out there. Yep. Let's face it. It's important for us to do the research. We need to understand there's organizations that are out there that are scamming people, and it's unfortunate. And there's also organizations that are maybe not crooked intentionally and maliciously, but they're quite frankly not using their funds very well. So we want to do the research. Don't let this objection just stand in the way, though. We want to make sure that we're taking initiative to get the things done that need to be done to deal with this objection. So get personally involved, become a vested investor, find out if they're a good organization, learn to give in a way that you use your money in a way that is stewarded towards the things that are actually going to help people. So I then want to also address this idea of I've worked hard to earn this money. I deserve to keep it for myself. I recognize that all of us here are working hard. And I think that that's important to recognize. And I applaud you guys for the hard work that you put in it. But again, I think you're going to find yourself limited if you keep just an ownership mindset where it's what I would argue is a scarcity mindset. I think instead, if you're thinking that what you've done is through your hard earned work and therefore you're not going to share it with others, I think you're going to find yourself not only very lonely in life, unfortunately, because you're going to miss out on the benefits of building relationships through being generous, but I think you're also going to find so often that money rules you. I think if you have this, again, I don't want to speak too universally because I know that there are different scenarios, but I've seen so often people who have this mindset of a scarcity mindset. They don't have enough. I've worked hard. I deserve this. It's an entitled sense of like, I have done something that I deserve then to be stingy with my money, or I deserve to not be generous. I think this not only misses out on like I said, the blessings of being generous, but it makes, I've seen so often where I've seen people serve money, and it's so ironic that the thing they're working so hard to make their life better ends up being a curse to them instead of a blessing. So I want to encourage you guys that again, this is not a shame thing. If you find any of these objections that we've discussed here tonight in yourself, then again, I think if we're honest, we'll probably find at times that each of these objections have come up in our lives at different times. I don't want to shame you guys or guilt you guys, but I want to encourage you to take the time to analyze what it is that's causing this and be creative in your solutions, because I think there are solutions to each of these objections, and we can grow in our ability to be generous. So I want to talk about the top 5 factors that enable you to earn a living. Well, first of all, I want, real quickly just to talk about this idea of entitlement. Actually, before I go on, I want to open it up again just to make sure that, does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, excellent. Well then, what is entitlement? I recognize that this is something, I think that probably a lot of us heard the word before, but I want to just dive into some of the details about what causes it and where it comes from. So the notion that people have a right, we talked about this idea of this ownership or the scarcity mindset, but at its heart, I think entitlement is this notion that people have a right to a particular benefit maybe without earning it. And this is not something that we want to encourage in others. We don't want to be generous, or we don't want to give away money so that other people can be entitled. But I want to encourage you guys that this is also something that we want to correct in ourselves. And this is not something that is necessarily implied by our generosity. What I mean by that is, just because we're giving away money does not mean that people are going to become entitled. And so this is something that certainly needs to be addressed. It's certainly something that that we need to understand, and we don't want to encourage entitlement, but it's not something that is always following being generous. And quite frankly, when generosity is done well, it actually leads the opposite in ourselves. It takes away an entitled mindset. We go from this scarcity ownership mindset, what's mine is mine, to a free-handed stewardship mindset. That's what's mine, or what I have in my hands, I can steward and grow, and it can be a blessing not only to myself, but to others around me. Does that make sense? Excellent. So, what do you guys, in terms of when you guys think about, the opportunities in life, what causes somebody, when you look at somebody who's really well off, will you guys take a couple of minutes, or a couple of seconds rather, just think about somebody you can imagine who's really well off. What are some of the things that contribute to that? Can you guys come off mute and maybe give some answers here? What are some things that really help set people ahead?
Hard work.
Hard work, yes.
Generational wealth.
Dedication.
Generational wealth. Somebody else mentioned, sorry, was that Isaac? You mentioned something?
Dedication.
Luck.
Luck. Yes.
They earn a good salary. They just
Yes.
have a job that has a really good salary.
Yes. Yes. Yes, you guys have named several of these, but I think, the place that you're born in, the city, certainly matters, right? Being born in LA versus Mumbai will dramatically change your ability to earn and your entitlement. Your chance of your birth, your parents, as Hiwami mentioned, your generational wealth that you're born into, your health, your personal health obviously is going to affect if you're not able to work, or if you're spending money, a lot of your money on paying for healthcare, because you're constantly sick, or your siblings or your parents are sick. It's very hard to then build wealth. Chance educational matters, career options matter. All of these things go into helping us, into basically creating opportunities for people, and some of these things we really don't have control over, right? I think a lot of these things, like location, where we were born, our parents, we didn't choose these things. But when you really think about this list here, what do you guys think? Like, how much control do you have over all of these things? When you look at, say, Ryan, the place you were born in, did you choose the place you were born in?
No.
No. What about your parents? Did you choose them?
No.
Nate, did you choose the amount of money that your family had when you were born?
Nope, can't control that one.
Yeah. These things dramatically affect your health, your educational opportunities. Sometimes we have an opportunity to choose what school we're going to, but do we have do we have the same infinite choice? You know, say for example, does someone born in, like I used the example of Mumbai, do they have the same choice of educational opportunities that, say, someone born in Los Angeles does? The answer is clearly no. And so when we look at ourselves, and I think this is going to be one of the biggest cures for entitlement, is feeling meaning entitlement, meaning the feeling that we're somehow entitled to the stuff that we have, that we are worked hard and earned everything that we have in our life, and therefore we shouldn't be generous towards others. I think this mentality, it ends up being not only a cancer for our soul, but I think one of the toxic for our soul, but I think one of the key ways to overcome it is understanding, first of all, in humility, that there are so many things each of us have been given that, quite frankly, we didn't choose, we didn't earn. Yes, there's hard work. Yes, there are things that we're doing that are contributing towards our success. But let's be real, the chance of where we were born, the birth, the parents, the education we were brought up in, if we had great parents who taught us how to steward our finances from a young age, that's going to make a dramatic difference. And I think recognizing that other people don't always have the same opportunities is going to go a long way to helping us have compassion on them. And I think compassion is going to be a key part of what helps us really be generous towards others. So in wrapping up, I want to go over just one more specific objection, and it is they will become entitled. So I touched on this earlier, but I want to specifically highlight it because I want to encourage you guys that yes, this is a possibility. Yes, people can become entitled when we give towards them. It's going to be a risk, absolutely. But I want to encourage you guys, if we do, I believe I can think of so many examples that this was the opposite of the case, that instead of inspiring entitlement, it actually inspired gratitude and humility. Somebody's life was dramatically changed. So for every example that we might point to and say, yeah, that caused entitlement, we can actually point to, I believe, many examples that the opposite was true. And I want to encourage you guys, this is part of what it means to be a responsible steward of your finances. If you're going to learn about generosity, if you're going to inspire generosity to others, you're going to lead by example. It's part of your responsibility, part of our responsibility, to find people to be able to give to people in such a way where it does not create entitlement. Yes, it's always a risk, but it doesn't have to be that way. So it's important to practice informed generosity. Informed generosity is what we are teaching here at Giving University, which is this idea of I want to inspire generosity in myself to give to others, and then I want to understand how to give well. So that is the overall goal of this class, or the main, or some of the main goals in this class that we want to continue to practice until we've mastered. So certainly, entitlement is dangerous. Absolutely. The giver may say, I'm entitled to keep my money, but we acknowledge this is toxic for the soul, and I think leads towards us serving money instead of money serving us. And I've seen it happen over and over and over again. It's a tragic thing when it does happen. The recipient may say, I'm entitled, have all my needs met, and no cost to myself. This is equally untrue, I think, and this is certainly not what you guys have experienced. You all have worked hard for the finances that are in your life, and you didn't expect other people to meet your needs when you weren't working at all. And so certainly we don't want to encourage this mindset in others, but this is definitely not the only mindset that people have towards people who are generous towards them. So we want to make sure that we're not using simple straw man fallacies, meaning we're simply using this weak argument. We're setting it up as the universal argument for everybody. Certainly some people are entitled, but that's not everybody. So do people born in adverse circumstances deserve their situation? Well, we could talk about that all night. We could certainly say that, yes, sometimes we are making choices that lead towards bad consequences. But we also acknowledge, as we saw earlier, that there are so many things, even in our lives, that are, quite frankly, not the results of our own choices. They're the results of, we want to call it luck, fate, providence, however you define it. it was the result of somebody else's choice. We were born into a certain family. We were born into a certain location. So I want to, in concluding here, I want to ask you guys, think for a second with me. What if we lived in a world where everyone was selfish? Just think for a second with me before maybe we come off. Before we come up, maybe we'll have a couple of us come off mute and share. Maybe if you guys have anything you'd like to share, examples of this. But I want to think about, what would the world look like? Is that the kind of world that we would want to live in? Carter, is that the kind of world that you want to live in, where everyone is selfish?
No, not necessarily. No, I think I think that it's gotten to a point where a lot more people have become selfish, but not. I don't know. I think if everybody was selfish, we wouldn't get anywhere. I don't think that we could get any farther than where we are with everybody being selfish.
I agree. What, Caleb and or Katie or Alex, actually, I guess all three of you there. What if the opposite was true? What if everyone in the world was generous? What do you think the world would look like?
It would look better than it does. I mean, we were talking about for the first question, if everyone in the world was selfish, we wouldn't have things like hospitals or just like basic necessities, education, any of the nonprofits, homeless outreach. So if everyone was generous, like,
I'd almost think it'd be like a utopia, because it doesn't sound like it's attainable. It would sound, or it'd be really, I don't know. That's where my head goes. What if everybody was generous? Because that's not possible.
I think, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Please continue.
No, you're good.
You're fine.
We're done.
I think we are in agreement here that that there's one world that we clearly rather live in, right? You know, we can think, and I want to think, man, what world do I want to help build? Do I want to contribute towards? Which one would I rather live in? And if I'm affecting, decisions of not only my own life, but I'm influencing others, I want to work towards creating a better world where people are generous. And so that, I think, is, if nothing else, one of the biggest reasons that we would participate in generosity and contributing towards a more generous world. So the giver may say, teach a man to beg for fish, and he will be begging for a lifetime. If you guys have heard that proverb before, it's certainly that giving to people, just meeting their needs, unfortunately has the side effect of the fact of it doesn't actually cure the problem, in the sense of they will need fish again tomorrow. They will always be begging. And if you're contributing towards their begging lifestyle, they will continue to imbibe that lifestyle, generally speaking, unless something else happens to come along that changes their lifestyle. But if we give a man a fish, you fed them for a day, right? So this idea that they'll be hungry again tomorrow. But if we teach them to fish, you've fed them for a lifetime. And so I think you guys are probably, some of us might be familiar with this proverb. And I think this is what we're really trying to get at through Giving University, is really teaching and really understanding, first of all, what does it look like to help train people towards not only being generous themselves, but inspiring generosity in others. And then also, what does it look like to give towards causes in organizations that are helping alleviate poverty, not just by helping people, give them their basic needs, but really helping them get out of their situation, their help through education or through funding. And we'll talk about some interesting organizations that are making microloans and different ones like that have some really creative ideas around them. But generally speaking, we're looking to create a world where we're teaching people to fish, where we're equipping them with dignity. And part of the equipping people with dignity, I believe, is giving them an ability to contribute to their own success, giving them an ability to work, giving them a reason to work. and the resources to do that. And you'd be surprised how often that is not, just something that is beyond the reach of most people. But if they have help from others, they can make something a completely different situation of their lives. All right, so I just want to talk then in our final minutes now, just about our homework. So I'm going to jump down into discussing next week. Let me see if I can will that show up? It's not showing up. Okay. 1 second. Let me just stop sharing for a minute. There we go. All right. All right. You guys can see homework then? Give me a thumbs up if you guys see that with me. Okay, excellent. So I want to talk. Okay, so you guys basically, you guys have already done your first analysis. So now I want you guys are pros at the 990 analysis form. So this should be a breeze, but I want you guys to choose 2 new organizations, and you can find those organizations online. You can find them through GuideStar. And you can find them local nonprofit organizations, but I want you guys to go research 2 organizations and find their 990 and use our 990 analysis tool to give them a score. Does that make sense? And then I want you guys for the class, look for a class 3 assignments email that will come out this right after this class. So we're in class 3 now. We're coming into the almost the middle of the semester already. So this goes by quickly. So keep up, look for class 3 assignments email, and it will be sent this evening. And then be sure to communicate with us if you have any questions, because if you're going to miss a class, we need to know about it. We need to make sure that we're stewarding the resources that we've been given, which is you guys as students. So we want to make sure that you're learning. So we take it very seriously. We want to equip you guys to do your best and to be able to learn this stuff in class. So if you're going to miss, or if you have any questions, or if there's things that are plaguing you, please let us know early and often.